Hi, I'm supernatural thriller author J.F. Penn, and you're listening to Genretainment.
Hi everyone, this is Genretainment, and we're your hosts, Marks
and Julie. And what you heard at the beginning of the show was a snippet from the theme song from our web series, Reality on Demand. It's a song composed and performed by our friend Tishan Hardy.
Today on Genretainment, we speak with YouTuber, podcaster, and author Michael La Ronn. We had him on 4 years ago, which I can't believe it's been that long. Since then, he's been a writing machine, writing a number of nonfiction books, fiction novels, doing podcasts. He's got a YouTube channel, all sorts of stuff.
We had a great time chatting with him. We talk about being an indie author. He shares writing tips. We discuss overcoming fear, do a little writer therapy, and go on a tangent about our rabbits and so much more.
And we're lining up a number of new episodes starting with this one. And we'll start coming out every other week with a new episode, plus an occasional bonus episode. We do want to apologize for delay in airing this episode. We recorded it late last year. I got super sidetracked with the film festival I was directing and my last term in the MFA program.
Yay, it's over. Congratulations, though.
We do mention the MFA in the interview, and I'm happy to tell you all that I graduated in January with a Master in Fine Arts in Writing Popular Fiction.
Yay.
So we got some fun stuff planned for the podcast now that I have some time freed up.
Yes, and you'll notice a few fun changes in the coming episodes. Plus, we have some fun projects we'll be announcing this year, but we'll stop there and start with our interview this week with Michael La Ronn. Enjoy.
Hi, Michael. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
Well, we're happy to have you.
Yeah, we're excited to have you back. And I looked to see how long it was last time. It was actually 2016, so it's been a while.
It has been a while, but we've kept in touch on Twitter, so it doesn't seem like it's been as long.
Yeah.
2016, this is 2020. Well, hardly anything's happened since then.
No, I mean, it's been completely boring.
Especially this year.
At home all the time now.
So touch base with you a little bit because we'll talk a little bit about it later too. You know, since we talked last, I got accepted into an MFA program, offered popular fiction, which I wouldn't have done anything that wasn't popular fiction because I don't see the point, at least for making money, right? And then
at this point, we really want degrees that might be useful for a career and making money.
And and then I'm going to graduate here in a few months. I'm going to launch my thesis, urban fantasy novel, and Julie's going to edit. And
I'm currently editing.
And we're going to co-write another series together.
Up till 3 a.m. doing so.
And the reason why I mention all that is because, you know, you're one of those people, whether you know it or not, sort of a mentor type person. Because I read all your nonfiction books, I watch your YouTube show.
I know your
podcast.
voice because I'm used to hear you from the other room and go, "That's Michael La Ronn on the television."
And you know, and I've referenced you in my MFA essays about stuff, and took some stuff we're going to talk about here in just a minute. So I just want to let you know. And I know you've been up to tons since you last appeared.
Nah, he hasn't been doing it.
Yeah. Well, first off, congratulations. I was just taking all that in. That's amazing. MFA program. You're going to graduate
Seton
here
Hill
University.
University.
Yeah, that's
Hazard
awesome.
Yet Forward. I'm excited because Seton's my maiden name. I think he should have gotten some sort of scholarship just for that.
Yeah.
There should be some money they should throw your way for that.
Exactly.
Right? But either way, you worked your way through it. You're almost done now, and you got your thesis going. That's exciting. Thank you for the kind words. That's awesome. It's really cool when people tell me like the impact that I've had on. You know, I mean, I like to think I play a small part in some of it, but I just kind of do it because it's fun for me, and it's cool to hear that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and you know, you and Joanna Penn. Also, I went ahead and joined the Alliance of Independent Authors, and I'm very, you know, I'm going to probably do a hybrid approach, but I am very much about indie author.
Well, his thesis is actually just book 1 of a planned series.
Yeah, and part of that's because, you know, you and Joanna Penn are big proponents of the Alliance of Independent Authors and stuff.
Yes, and I have actually threatened if he ever tries to feels like caving and going with traditional publishing, I have refused to continue editing.
Hey, that's That's not a bad idea. And
I'm like, if you ever begin to cave, I will leave you high and dry.
Okay, so you've been doing a lot of stuff. Can you just now, anybody who wants to know a lot more about your background, check out our past episode from 2016. It's like 100, it's in the 120s,
online.
early 120s, yeah, online. But just to kind of touch a little bit base on why, because you're like 100% indie author, if I'm not mistaken. And can you just tell us a little bit about why you chose to be an indie author and why someone should consider
Pioneer.
that? Yeah, you're definitely a pioneer.
Yeah. Ironically, I'm 99% indie now. So I actually just published a book with the Alliance of Independent Authors, and they're publishing it for me. So
Cool.
That's right.
it's kind of ironic that like I published a book with Ally, and we're all about self-publishing, but
I know, that's why I'm chuckling. It's hilarious. I love it.
It's pretty hilarious, but it was really more of a donation to them to help them out. And so I've been up to a lot over the past 4 years since the last time we spoke. I chose indie mainly because when I first started, I tried to get my books out to agents. I tried to go the traditional publishing route, and you knock on all these doors and nobody opens the door, and I got rejection after rejection. And I thought, it's got to be me. There's something wrong with me because everybody else is getting acceptance letters. Everybody else is out there doing it, and I'm just here writing these stories in science fiction and fantasy. And I've learned over the years that it wasn't me. It had nothing to do with me at all. In fact, it had zero to do with me. And I decided that if I was going to go into business for myself, I am going to do it the way I want to do it and not play by somebody else's rules. And
Amen.
I can't remember. Yeah, absolutely. And Marks, I can't remember if you and I talked about this the last time we were on, but I had a near-death experience in 2012, and I was out on a nice dinner with my wife and felt ill, and lo and behold, I ended up in the hospital for a month. And I remember being on my hospital bed, and I was like doped up on morphine and just staring at the wall, and I'm like, what am I doing with my life? And I swore on that hospital bed that I was going to become a writer. I was going to stop sending stuff out to magazines, stop sending stuff out to traditional publishers, and I was going to do it my way. And in many ways, that was one of the best decisions in my life that I ever made that really set the foundation for me. So to answer your question on what was it that decided, made the chips fall indie for you, for me, it was really a life and death experience.
That is so awesome. I have so much respect for you because I actually almost died in 2016. It was.
Wow.
And I have yet to follow through completely on.
You've not written 50,000 books.
I had a similar thing going, but I haven't accomplished these things that I wanted to, and a lot of it actually had to do with writing it. I have accomplished very little compared to you, so congratulations.
Oh, wait! Everybody has their own challenges, and especially with the near-death experiences. And it was really eye-opening for me. And at that point, I was working a dead-end job. I was just working this just crappy job, and you wake up and you go to work and you come home and you sit in front of the TV for the rest of the night. And I'm like, there has to be something more. I can't do this. I have to do more. And so
Exactly.
I like the freedom. I like the ability that I can choose what I want to write. And sometimes the things I write, people don't want to buy. And sometimes the things I write, I don't think they're going to sell at all. And they perform better than I ever dreamed. And that scares a lot of people, just to candidly, because every decision you make is completely yours. Right. But I happen to like that. I like to live on that. I like to live on the edge, so to speak.
Well, and it's not just living on the edge. It's actually taking back some of your power
and
control because, my mental image of traditional publishing is you going hat in hand, down on one knee, on both knees, begging, will you please let me be a writer? Please, I'll write whatever you want. And I'll change all of my the things that I wanted to write about to suit you. Please, 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 will you please let me publish my book and only get maybe 10% of the profit?
And I'll give you all my copyrights.
Yeah.
And I'll give you complete control. Please take complete control of all of my intellectual property.
Yeah.
I have a mentor. He says exactly what you just.
Yeah.
Going to traditional publishers with your copper cup.
Yeah.
begging them for handouts, and you end up with nothing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just you're just in indentured servitude, and then they want you to thank you for it. You know?
Well, I think that's part of my motivation too of doing indie. When I say hybrid, like I have a bunch of short stories.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try traditionally publish those, and there may be a novel at some point that I'll try hybrid. And Julie's like, "Don't do it."
You can get your own editing.
We'll see how things go, but
It's not going to be worth the financially. It won't be worth the time it takes to edit it that way. Then.
But it's amazing how far we've gone with authors, because I was reading about Edgar Allan Poe, one of his like a book about him, and he was a big fighter for authors getting paid more. And then back when he was first starting, there was very little copyright laws. Like people were just ripping off British writers or just bringing that over for free, and
The robber barons weren't just on the railroads.
and so it's hard for American authors to come out with stuff, and so it's nice to see that something like Alliance of Independent Authors exists, and that you can make a career, and you have options now. You can control your rights. I guess. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, would you like me to explain what Ally is, just for anyone who doesn't know?
Yes,
please.
Go
I'm
ahead.
not sure how much you've talked about them on your show, but the Alliance of Independent Authors is a nonprofit organization for self-published writers. So if you think about like carpenters or electricians, they usually have like trade associations where they do continuing education and things like that. And the whole premise is, well, why don't we have that for writers? And so this is an organization that advocates and provides information for self-published writers to achieve ethics and excellence in self-publishing. And so Ally puts out a lot of really good information on how to self-publish with style, how to find editors, how to find cover designers, copyright things. And so you can find them if anyone's interested at selfpublishingadvice.org. So I just thought I had to throw the plug in there.
Yeah, no, I love the way you mentioned it, like having like the other organizations to support, because they're master craftsmen, and that's very similar. Writing is an art, but it's also a craft. It's a trade union for a different kind of craftsman.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love, you mentioned one of your books, when you join, you get access to, you can buy them separately, of course, but when you join, you get access to all these different guidebooks that are really full of resources, including one of yours. And I think Ally offers a lot for what you pay for.
And I think a lot of people don't understand how self-publishing has changed in recent years. I think so many people are hanging on to the old stereotype of, oh, they're the people who couldn't hack it in the real publishing world, so they had to publish their own little book that is just basically like a little notebook and for their friends and family. And they don't understand that. I mean, as critical as I am of things like the internet and social media and the terrible things it's done to our society, on the flip side of that, the other side of the coin, is that so many more opportunities for entrepreneurship have been opened for everybody as a result, and that the game has changed, and it's not just the people who couldn't hack it, it's people who choose to be their own basically small business owner, as well as being a writer, and to just sort of take their own fate in their own hands and go it and do it themselves.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. That's such a great point, because when I started doing it, there was still a tinge of that. Mm-hmm. Like it was, oh, you're a self-published writer. It's kind of like Thanksgiving, where you've got the adults at the big table and you got the little kids at the little table. Everybody just expects you to go to the little table, and you're looked down upon. People kind of look at you sideways, like you're doing what? Yeah. And now I found that the majority of people still do not understand what self-publishing is, and still cannot wrap their head around it, but they're more accepting of it.
Yeah.
which is really interesting.
And from what we have been able to gather, the majority of authors who are successfully working as authors primarily, not writing on the side while holding down a day job, but able to write full-time professionally, tend to be in the independent at the kiddie table at the independent and in the independent market, because like we said, the traditional publishing, they do much less work, but they take almost all of the profits from the writer, and the writer does not hold on to the rights of their own intellectual property that they created. And so the more successful financially, and those who are able to, most people who want to be authors, want to be writers, want to do it for their primary profession. And you have a greater likelihood of accomplishing that as an independent writer in this day and age.
Yeah, and it's funny because all those authors at the big table are now coming to the little table. Because the little table's cool now. And so, everything you said is it's exactly it. It's more control, and it's more control over your copyright, more control over your money, more control over how you run your business, more control over your marketing. I mean, some people see it as a giant burden. I see it as that's how you run a business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and they're afraid of the marketing often, but even if you go the traditional publishing route, you are responsible for the vast majority of the marketing out there. They don't do the marketing for you. Yeah. You are required to do most of that yourself as well. And I think many sort of more introverted writers find that intimidating, and that is what puts them off of it. But they don't realize that same burden will be on their shoulders if they go the traditional route.
Yep.
I feel like traditional publishers at some point are going to have to change what they do to stay relevant at some point. Yeah. So I know we will.
It is a changing world, and if you don't adapt, your business will not survive.
I know at our last residency at the university, we always have guest speakers. We had Melissa Marr, who does like YA and paranormal romance and fairy tale reimaginings and stuff like that. Anyway, she's a traditional publisher, but she said that like her urban fantasy series she's going to start is going to be indie. And I asked her like, well, why'd you decide that? And she's like, well, it's urban fantasy. A lot of publishers aren't accepting urban fantasy, even though there's still a market out there. Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of people who are making money off of urban fantasy, indie. So I'm just going to do that and be hybrid. So.
Well, hey, it's true. Traditional publishers have kind of turned their backs on urban fantasy right now. That's going to change, though. I found everything is cyclical.
Yeah.
Vampires are out now, but all it's going to take is the next New York Times bestseller to have a vampire in it.
That's because people started thinking vampires go to high school and they sparkle in the frickin' sunlight. Right? So, I mean, I'm sorry. Those vampires don't deserve to survive. Right. This is a tender subject for me.
Yeah. Well, they come back every 10 years or so. So we're probably due for another resurgence.
I bet you once Jim Butcher ends Dresden Files and and he does something different, suddenly they'll be like looking for the next Jim Butcher probably. So.
Well, and then that's another thing. Traditional publishers, they say they want originality, but it's very similar to film and television, where like X-Files got really big. We're looking for the next X-Files, and they missed the point. The point is, before X-Files came along, there was no next X-Files. The whole point of it was that it was completely original for the time, and that's why it was so popular. And instead of learning the lesson of, wow, we should take a chance on something that's really good quality, but completely different than anything that's been popular before, instead they keep trying to create clones of something that had been successful, completely missing the point of the lesson they should have learned, which was when it became popular, it wasn't the next whatever. It was its own original thing.
Yeah.
Which
I know a lot of
kind of unfortunate.
I know a lot of your fiction, Michael, is very original. You got
yes.
Oh, thanks.
We need to talk. We need to have you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about, because you've been writing a lot of nonfiction books right now.
Yeah. See, listeners, he's very versatile.
Yeah. I mean, between your nonfiction books, and you have a bunch more, or you've been working on a bunch of them, and then you got your YouTube channel with great tips, and then you got a podcast, at least one podcast. I think you have the daily one. I'm not sure if you have other podcasts.
Yeah, I have 3 podcasts.
Oh my gosh, I need to check up on my subscriptions, make sure I got them all.
You've been a little busy.
What are those podcasts?
Yeah, I've got Writing Tip of the Day, which you mentioned. It's a writing tip every Monday through Friday in about 5 minutes or less. And then I've got another show called The Writer's Journey. And that is basically me turning on the microphone and just talking about what's on my mind as a working writer every Thursday. And then I've got another show with the Alliance of Independent Authors, actually. Orna, the founder and director, Orna Ross, and I, we answer the most common self-publishing questions. So that's called the Ask Ally Member Q&A podcast.
I do listen to that too. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
He's been a little busy.
Well, Michael's got I don't know how you do it, to be honest with you, because you also have, I think are you still in law school?
Yes, I am.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah, and married and have a kid and everything. I don't know how you do it all. So time management skills, this is the guy talking.
Yeah. Well, technically, we have 3
I just do
children,
it.
just none of them are human.
Cats are a little bit easier, I think.
We got a rabbit.
I have a rabbit too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. What kind of rabbit do you guys have?
She is a 6-year-old albino, half lion head, half mini hoto.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we've got a Flemish Giant.
Oh, wow. See, we adopted her when she was 5. Bless her heart, she'd never been spayed. She had been neglected and abused. And I still have scars where she drew blood many times on me, and I thought she just was one of those vampire human flesh-eating rabbits.
We made a lot of Monty Python jokes.
Yes, I was like,
Nice.
I need the holy hand grenade of Antioch. And it took about 4.5, almost 5 months before she stopped trying to kill me, and she finally relaxed and realized no one's going to hurt her, and she can, just be a happy little bunny. She's 4.2 pounds, and we were all quite terrified of her at first.
Yeah.
It wasn't her fault. She'd been mistreated. She'd actually been neglected and outright abused. We found, we realized based on,
And she would flinch a lot. When
she panicked and bit me, and then she flinched like I was going to hit her. And then they had no idea, so they couldn't tell us she has a vision impairment. So she'd get startled, when you go to pet her, moving like you would around a regular sighted bunny, but she wouldn't see your hand coming and then just suddenly be touched, which would be frightening.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So we've had her for about 1.5 years.
How long have you had your rabbit?
Yeah, what about yours?
Yeah, we've had our rabbit for about 2 years. She used to be a teacher's rabbit, if you can believe that. So she used to actually be in a school. So she loves children, hates adults. Kind of one of those things, but yeah, I think she's 5 years old, and she's gigantic. She's probably like 7 pounds. And people, I had an electrician come over once, and he's like, "Is that a rabbit or is it a kangaroo?" I said, "Well played."
And people get really confused when they see them out hopping around. It's like, no, they're litter box trained. They can get out. And,
all right, so your nonfiction book. I don't know how we got on rabbits.
Because
hey,
you know how it is. If someone
down
says
a
they
rabbit
got a
hole.
rabbit, they're my friend for life.
So what's some of your recent nonfiction books you like to mention?
I have a number of nonfiction books. My big thing now, since the pandemic started, is helping people get out of their own way, because everyone is at home. Everyone is staring at the blank monitor or the cursor on the monitor, and they're trying to figure out, what the heck am I going to do? Can I follow that dream? If there's any time to do it, now is the time. And I'm trying to get people to get over the fear and the self-doubt, because I believe that if you can never eliminate fear from your life. Fear is ever morphing and it's ever changing. Mm-hmm. But if you can tamp it down and get a handle on it, then anything is possible for you. And I used to struggle with self-doubt and fear, and I've written over 50 books now, and so I don't really worry too much about it. And so I have a book out. It's called Mental Models for Writers, and it's 73 ways to elevate your thinking, improve your writing, and capture success. And so I was looking at a lot of famous people, and it's like, what is it that makes them successful? And I don't know if I'm sure you've heard of Warren Buffett, right? Billionaire.
No, who's that?
Yeah. Well, his second in command, Charlie Munger, famously, he proposed this idea of mental models, and it's this idea of keeping a lattice work of ideas that you can use. They're almost like hats. If you need help with some sort of business problem, you put on a hat which represents a way that someone famous or a mathematician or an economist thought about, and it helps you see the problem in a different way. Same thing with psychology. There's all sorts of really interesting ideas in the world of psychology. Why not take those and bring those into the writing world? And how would that change how you saw a problem when you're looking at the murky middle of your manuscript, for example? What if what was holding you back was the laws of psychology and not anything that had to do with, your own feelings of not being able to write your book, right? And so it's a kind of a different ideas that you can use as a writer in all areas of your writing life to help you get past some of those blocks and do things that you didn't think that you could do previously.
Great, yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's one of them. I've got a bunch of others. I'm kind of in a mode right now where with the pandemic, I was like, I need to write more books. So I've written probably like 5 or 6 books this summer, and so I'm going to be publishing them all. And they all have to do with writing tips. I turned one of my podcasts, Writing Tip of the Day, into a book. So it recaps all of the writing tips for the year into a single book, which could be helpful for people that maybe haven't heard the show or don't want to listen to all of the backlist episodes. I've got another series that I'm launching. It's people have asked me a lot about how, like, if you're brand new to writing, how do you start? And what are all the things that you have to learn? Because there are a lot of things that you have to learn. It's not just craft, it's marketing, it's business, it's copyright, it's contracts. Yeah. And so they asked me, how do we solve this problem? And I was like, well, I could put together a list of bullet points and, share those with you. But I'm like, that's really, really boring. So I came up with this idea of what if you could take all of the things that you had to learn as a writer, and what if you could present them in a different way? So I took things like writing craft and business and distribution, and I turned them into like these vacation destinations, and it's like these fictional places. And I had some maps illustrated, and so I wrote a book called the Indie Author Atlas, and it's your guide to the 5 continents of the writing world. And it's written in like the style of a Lonely Planet travel guide. And it starts off in like the strategy islands and all the things you need to learn to get your mindset right as an author. And it takes you through the world. And so, it's kind of a kind of a fun project to work on.
Cool.
Well, and I love the way you were talking about that because, really, if you want to write, but you're afraid of getting started or whatever, there's always going to be a reason that it's a great time to start, and there's always going to be a reason that it's a terrible time to start. And that fear isn't going to go away depending on what's going on at that moment. It's just going to change. If fear's getting in the way, that fear is only going to morph with each evolving situation. And so, it's sort of like the only thing we have to fear is fear itself thing, until you learn to push through the fear is always going to be there. It'll just change to match whatever the situation is at the moment.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I was, have you ever heard of Gavin DeBecker?
I wish I could say yes and sound really smart.
Yeah. I was going to say, I haven't talked to very many people who have, but he used to be the head security guy for Oprah. And so it was his job to make sure that like Oprah was safe, and there's a lot of crazy people out there.
That would be actually not an easy job.
Yeah, it would be a weird job. And so now he's the number 1 security guy for Jeff Bezos, actually. Wow. And I heard an interview with him the other day, and he was talking to your earlier point, Julie, about fear. And he said that there's a difference between fear, like real fear, and anxiety. Like real fear is you're walking in the forest one day and you see a saber-toothed tiger and you're about to die. Like that's real fear, and that fear it's designed to save you. It will help you do things that you didn't think you could do in order to save your life. See, we conflate that with anxiety. And he said something really cool in an interview. He said, true fear is something that will take your life. Anxiety is something that you made up or imagined. Yeah. So what I tell writers is this whatever it is that you're worried about right now, are you going to die at the end of it? Or is it that you're just imagining it, or it's something that you're worried about? And I use those terms bluntly, right? And 9 times out of 10, well, actually 9.9999 times out of 10, it's something that we imagine. You know, no one's going to come to your house and shoot you, or come to your house with a mob and pitchforks because you wrote an urban fantasy novel, you know, that didn't sell. Exactly. You know, and that's what I'm just trying to get people to understand. There's nothing to be afraid of.
I think we confuse a lot of things with fear.
One of the reasons why I really want to start out of the gate with my thesis with indie rather than traditional is because I feel like, and it's not to follow the school program or anything, they do teach about indie author stuff. They had Rachel Herron as a guest speaker. I don't know if you know her.
Oh, cool. I do. Yeah, very familiar with Rachel.
Yeah, and you know, so they do try to show both sides, but well, somewhat, you know. But although many of the mentors are primarily traditional authors, but I see all my fellow students, or many, not just my class, but different classes ahead of me and behind me, and they all focus on this traditional thing because they feel like they need to, for whatever reason, they feel like maybe that's the only way to make money, or that
prove something, or
prove that they're really an author, or whatever it is. And then what happens to some of them is that they just they get in a cycle of like, you know, submit, get rejected, make some more changes, submit, get rejected, make more changes. Then so at some point they just start to give up a little bit, you know, or they start doing something else. And I hate to see that, because I'm just like, you guys you worked on the story for like 2 years.
All this trouble, you might as well just publish it.
Yeah, just publish it.
And Michael, what you said reminded me of something my grandma used to tell me if I was nervous about, you know, speaking in front of somebody or whatever. She'd go, well, Julie, they can't eat you. It's just like, they can't eat you. What's the problem?
Exactly.
I can still hear my grandma going, what are you worried about? They can't eat you. I mean, just do it.
I'm going to start using that. That's fantastic.
That is Southern Indiana wisdom right there.
Indeed. Yeah, it's crazy. They're not going to eat you, you know. But I think a lot of it in academia, at least, it's this thing about pride. You know, you don't want to self-publish your book because that means that you feel in some way that you're not good enough.
I didn't think of it that way, but yeah, pride.
At least that's my perception. I think that it's weird because I got my start in academia, and my first mentors were very traditional publish focused, and they're saying, hey, you know, I don't think you should give up on traditional publishing. And I'm like, no, I think you're wrong. and so many of the people that I kind of came up with had this feeling that they just can't accept self-publishing. Even though it might be viable, it just doesn't feel right. It feels dirty, you know? And that's not true, but it's kind of unfortunate to see people, when they have a career opportunity potentially, to just shut the door and not go through it, kind of like to your point, Marks. And, you know, hopefully they'll come around and kind of see that this is something that you can do. And
yeah, it goes back to your point of getting out of your own way.
You know?
Yeah, and there's a lot of flexibility with indie authors. Like, I've told people before who maybe struggle with traditional publishing, I said, well, why don't you just publish it? And like, well, what if it's not good or whatever? Well, I mean, you could just, you know, unpublish it. Or you can unpublish it and then make changes and then republish it. And they're just looking at me like, what are you talking about?
You can hire your own editor. You don't have to be married
exactly.
to them. You know, you don't have to marry them. You can just pay them.
But yeah, so... And that's that's foreign to traditional publishing. That's impossible to do some of those things. But.
Yeah, and I had a mentor tell me once. He said, think about it like this: if you publish a book and no one buys it, that means no one knows you published a book. Really, I mean, if you think about it. So, what do you really have to lose? I mean, I I mean, people think that like with writing, it's like we all have day jobs, right? When we started our day jobs, we weren't perfect at those jobs. We had to get training. We had to be in those jobs for a little bit, maybe get promoted and climb up the ladder a little bit. Like you don't become an electrician you don't wake up one day and say, I want to be an electrician. Like there's training, there's things you have to do. There's hours of training and practicum and practical experience that you have to get. Well, it's the same thing with being a writer. Like your book is not going to be perfect right out of the gate. You might not have the greatest command of storytelling abilities when you first start, and that's okay. And I think people, they want to be perfect right out of the gate with that first book, not realizing that that's actually a not realistic expectation.
Right. And like me, like I always, once I get started, I just start comparing what I've written to other things I've read that other people have published. And without realizing in that moment, I wasn't reading their first draft. Well, I suppose Ray Bradbury, you could argue, probably it might have been. I think he pretty much didn't like to do rewrites, and he came out with Fahrenheit 451.
Yep.
Bastard, but
all
he was
in one
great.
draft.
But but the majority of the time, you're not reading their first draft. You don't know what it started out as.
Yeah, they got an editor, they got feedback,
Yeah, they went through rewrite, and so stop comparing what you're coming up with as soon as pen hits the paper with something that's been edited and beta read and rewritten and then published.
Yeah, we get stuck in the theater of our own minds, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When it comes to that sort of thing and comparisonitis, and it's all a very real problem. If you can get over that, the whole world is your oyster.
I think most writers need therapy, is what I've been hearing. We all need.
It's funny you say that. It's absolutely true.
Yeah, we all need our own little support group.
Yeah, I had a mentor tell me once. He said, "When you start becoming successful is when you really need the therapy." And my head exploded. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Oh, he was so right. He was so right.
I can believe it, because having never been successful, I wouldn't know what to expect.
Yeah. And trolls start to come out of the woodworks when you're more successful. People start taking shots at you, and there's all sorts of other things with money that you have to think about. I mean, it can be devastating to someone, and I use that word deliberately. And I think every writer should get therapy. I started therapy last year just for some personal reasons, and it was one of the best things I ever did.
Exactly.
And I think it made my writing better. Like some people think, oh, I don't want to do it because, my writing it'll make my writing worse because I'm so messed up. That's what makes my stuff good, And
oh, really?
I think it's the opposite.
People think that?
I've had someone tell me that once. Yeah, believe it or not.
Bless their hearts.
And I was like, well, help me understand something here. You have all of these pent up emotions, and it's probably causing you problems in other areas of your life. If you maybe saw somebody and got some help, maybe that would give you a clearer mind when you came to the page.
Right. I don't think a disordered mind and a crushed spirit is going to equal greater success on the page.
I don't think so either. And there's such a stigma around therapy.
Oh yeah.
I wrote a book, and it was the book that kind of changed everything for me. It's called Be a Writing Machine. Mm-hmm. And I wrote this book in 2018 because my biological parents divorced when I was a baby, so I never got to know my biological father, and I kind of carried these really bad emotions with me throughout my life. Like I kind of normalized it, and it wasn't okay. Like just not having a father in the home, and it causes problems, Mm-hmm. And I tried to find him in 2018, and I found him on Facebook, and then he wanted nothing to do with me. Mm-hmm. And that was pretty devastating, And so I wrote this book as a way to help me get out of those feelings. Like I just was not okay for a while. Yeah. And writing is what helped me with that. In many respects, writing itself is therapy. And I wrote that book, and it was kind of part autobiographical part my manifesto on how to write faster, how to write smarter, all that stuff. And to my surprise, the book kind of took off.
Oh,
And
cool.
I think it was because like it was just honest, like you just kind of told things like it was. And if I hadn't tried to wrestle with those emotions in some way, I would have never written that book. And, it wouldn't have done so many really good things in my life. And so I just tell people it's never going to hurt you to sit down and talk to someone, even if you're not dealing with any major problems right now. Like there's no stigma around it. It's a good thing for people to go out there and work on themselves.
Yeah. And, you had to learn that, his problems, his not wanting to know you, that was because of issues he's got. That was his problem. He's carrying around some baggage. He's got these issues. And, you can't take someone else's issues on as your own.
Yeah.
But
which is exactly what we do, though. And that's why we need the help.
Yeah, but it's so much easier to see that in somebody else's situation.
Well, when you think about fiction, in many ways, if you have like a strong story arc, internal story arc, you're like a therapist for your characters, right? Helping them figure out how to repair their psychological wounds. I
wonder if that's why there are so many things about where I'm from, my home that I love, but one of the things, there is a huge stigma still around getting any sort of mental health treatment, and there's a stigma around having mental illness, even just struggling emotionally with something. And there's also, so many people don't understand why you would want to write or read fiction. It's like, well, it's not real, what's the point,
Oh, yeah.
Such a grounded mentality, but it's like, well, because, you can get something out of it.
Exactly.
It can better the soul of the person writing it and the person reading it as well.
I've been writing a lot, and in urban fantasy, a lot of times it's first person. So I've been enjoying writing first person, but I've been trying to do multiple POVs, and I try to do these very dramatically different kind of characters. And I find it really interesting to get in their perspective and try to just see how they're different. And I don't know, it's
find each other voice.
Yeah, find their voice, and also it's fun because it's almost like I'm acting in a way, like I'm trying to act. So to those characters, so it's kind of cool.
And
but
acting's fun.
We're getting close to the end, so there's a couple of things I really want to make sure we cover.
We've covered a lot of his nonfiction, but we have not covered enough of his fiction.
Yeah. Well, I want to cover, there's an online course you did that I took when you first did it.
Yeah.
And it is urban fantasy, but it wasn't specifically necessarily urban fantasy. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Tell them a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'll give the quick elevator pitch for it. So I did a course. It was called How to Write to Market Without Selling Your Soul. So there's this, we make it a dichotomy. I don't really think it's a dichotomy in our industry that you either write your passion and make no money, or write to market and make a ton of money, even though you might not like what you're writing. And so I was like, how that's kind of BS. So how do I prove this wrong, or how can I try to anyway? And so I put together this course, and it was me trying to figure out how I could write a book at the intersection of art and commerce, something that I truly enjoyed and that also could make me some money. And so I wrote a book. It was called The Shadow Deal, The Good Necromancer, Book 1. And it's about a necromancer who's an ex-necromancer because he dabbled into the dark arts, and his family ended up getting killed because of a mistake that he made making a deal with a demon. And he's spent the last 7 years repenting for his sins. And he gets dragged back into the dark arts to save an old friend. And I decided to write this, and I wrote the whole book in public. So I wrote all the chapters, and I would upload the chapters as I finished them. And I would talk about what I was doing to market the book, what I was doing to make some artistic decisions in the story that were very to the market, right? And I basically documented my entire process of coming up with the novel, writing it, editing it, hiring the cover designer, hiring the editor, and the things that I was doing to market and position books so that you could see some of the decisions I was making behind the scenes about the cover, for example, or maybe there was some element of the main character that I tweaked. And so I wrote that, I did that course and put it up, and that was kind of a brief description of it.
That is so cool. And if you learn nothing else from this, everyone, please understand, never make a deal with a demon. It just doesn't end well.
It never ends well.
I mean,
Especially
how
for
many
my
books do you need to read? How many episodes of Supernatural do you need to watch to learn this is not okay?
Yeah, it's kind of one of those. It's like a power grab. It's like, I know I'm doing this deal, but what I'm getting from the deal is so much better.
Yeah.
Or, so it's like it's worth the risk. It's worth the bodily harm and death.
Yeah, and then it's not until it's not.
Yeah.
And I found it
That is really neat the way you did that.
I found it very helpful because it was early on whenever I was
Yeah.
writing the urban fantasy book, and so it was helpful. Plus, because you were doing all this research about urban fantasy, which is very helpful for me, you also put together or teamed up with some people to put together a database, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Tell
Yes,
us
I
about
did.
that. That is so neat.
Yeah, so I've got some friends. John P. Logsdon, he's a great urban fantasy writer, and Ben Zackheim, also an urban fantasy writer. We had this idea. I actually met the guys at 20 Books Vegas, and I think I met them in passing. And then we happened to be in a Facebook group, and I was mentioning that I had this idea about an urban fantasy book database, because part of the research I was doing in this course was I was finding that the best way to classify urban fantasy is actually not at all how Amazon or bookstores classify it. See, bookstores, they just look at urban fantasy and, all urban fantasy is the same.
Yeah.
And that's just not true. There's so many different shades of it. So I thought the best way to think about it is you've got think about the main character instead. So like when I read the Dresden Files, I love it because I'm reading about a wizard. And when I read a shapeshifter story, I love it because of the shapeshifter. And my theory was that people who read urban fantasy are drawn to the type of character that is the lead. And so we created this database, and it's called the Urban Fantasy Database. And it's a database that has as many series as we could find for urban fantasy. And authors who write urban fantasy are welcome to submit their books to it. We'll approve it. And the goal was to try to get as many urban fantasy series in the same place as possible. And what we could do then is we could put in the urban fantasy series, the author, but we could also put in the type of supernatural character that the main hero is. We could also put in the profession. So if you like PIs, like if you like, Jim Butcher, Harry Dresden, well, wouldn't it be nice if you could click a button and find all of the books in the database that have a wizard PI?
I love that.
Like, that would be odd. That's like an urban fantasy reader's heaven, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many different types of supernatural characters too, like ghosts and all sorts of, like we were getting all these put in here, and we're like, wow, this is like really, really cool, like what writers come up with. And so the whole purpose of it is you can slice and dice the database virtually any way you can think of to find your next favorite urban fantasy read. And it's cool for readers because they can use that to find books, but it's cool for writers because it's free marketing.
Yeah.
That is a really great thing, because that is, I mean, how many times do you finish, like you're reading something and you get to the end of the series and you're like, oh, there isn't another one of these, but I want to read something else like this. And then you're kind of like stuck staring into the vast void of the internet going, where is that book I want to read?
Because Goodreads will not save you.
No, it doesn't,
we all know how successful we are with that.
It's not as helpful as you think when you start out.
No.
So we get close to wrapping up here.
Not yet. We got a few more things.
Oh, okay. Well, for tips, do you have any tips you learned by doing that for urban fantasy authors, perhaps, that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I would love to share one tip, and that is that if you think about, actually I have two tips. First things first, I always tell people, just write what you want to write. That's more important than anything in terms of making money, because if you write what you want to write and then you get paid for that, that's a heck of a lot better than writing about some type of character or in some genre that you're not aware of, and then you don't like it, and then it starts to feel like a job, and that's no fun. That's the whole reason we want to become full-time writers, so that it doesn't feel...
Well, go work another job you don't like.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
fewer hours.
Exactly. I'll go back to being a claims adjuster if I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
It's no fun.
It always makes my heart ache when I hear a traditional author who answers questions like from fans, and they're like, "Are you going to write another book in the series? Are you going to write whatever?" And they're "Well, I'm interested in it, but the publisher isn't, so
they won't let me.
Well, maybe someday." And like,
yeah,
oh.
that is the epitome of how not to treat your fans. And this you asked me what I had learned from this. That was the first thing: is write what you want to write. And if you can't honor your fans and respect your fans, do you deserve to have a career? And I'm just being honest.
Good point.
Because you would not be where you are if it were not for the people who were paying you their hard-earned money. And I have a problem with that. I really do. I mean, I think that it's one thing if you've written a book for 20, if you're in a series that's 20, 30 books long, and all of a sudden you don't want to write that anymore, that's a totally different story, right? But if you've written book one in a series and you've got a few people that want to read it and you're not going to write it because it's not commercially viable, the few people that bought it, I mean, do something for them, right?
Exactly.
I know this makes me a little bit of an alien compared to others, but that's the area of right to market where I don't like. Like I don't like that part of it because it feels like you can start to become tied. It's almost like golden handcuffs. Like you're tied to a certain genre or you're tied to a certain series, and that is a really difficult tightrope to walk. So if you're going to have to walk that path, why not do it to writing something that you love?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, very good points.
Well, I want actually to have him talk a bit about all of his fiction. We've touched a little bit on it, but I think we touched more in his nonfiction. I really want to hear more about his fiction.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I write fiction from the perspective of underdogs, and these are characters who, they're not the first people or things that you would think of when you read a story. So like my most popular series, it's called The Last Dragon Lord. And it's about a bloodthirsty dragon lord who is just a brutal dictator, and he gets overthrown. And the whole story is about him seeking revenge against the conspiracy that overthrew him. And I like to describe him as one part Smaug from Lord of the Rings, one part Richard III, and one part Francis Underwood from House of Cards. So you're kind of dealing with a brutal dude here.
Wow.
And he's trying to make his way in a future that has forgotten him. Yeah, and in many ways he's an underdog. He's not the character that you would think of when you think of a hero. But slowly he's kind of like a train wreck on every page. Like readers have told me, I can't stop turning the page, even though I know this is wrong. And so that's one of my more popular series. I have another series called Android X, and that takes place in the year 2300, the science fiction series. And that is about an android special agent who's hunting down rogue androids who are on murdering sprees. And so it's kind of like a buddy cop story between this android and his human engineer. And it takes place in the year 2300, and the world is a very different place. Humans and androids living together after a pretty awful civil war, or a singularity that almost destroyed the world. And that was a fun series to write as well.
Neat.
And both of those are available in audio. So
Robo Buddy Cop. The voice of that
Robo Buddy Cop. Yes. That's a really good way to put it. Yeah, you've got the X as the main character. He's the android, and he's super stoic and exactly what you'd think an android would be. And his partner, Shortcut, is kind of a naive 20-something who's really good at engineering, but not so good with social skills. And X has better social skills.
With an android, huh?
Exactly. Imagine getting your dating advice from an android. That'd be kind of funny. And so it's a story between them.
I think I dated those guys in the past.
I have no comment on that. Yeah. So that's my fiction in a nutshell. MichaelLaRonn.com is where you can find it. And like I said, I like to write about underdogs. I've written other stories. I've written a story about a kick-ass teddy bear with a sword and shield. And
what's that called? I haven't heard about that one.
Yeah. Sword Bear Chronicles. Theo and the Festival of
Shadows.
Yeah, so it's kind of like your underdog character. I've written another series that, I've written another series called Moderation Online, and that's about a group of terrorist vegetables attempting to take over an empire attempting to overthrow an empire of processed foods. And so
I'm rooting
kind of
for
out
him.
there. Yeah. So, you want to root for vegetables. You can't not root for vegetables in a story like that. So.
Or root for root vegetables.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one of the main characters is an onion. So. Yeah,
Oh, that's
cool.
neat. And
Broccoli
I'm sure he has a lot of layers. Sorry.
He does. He actually has a mohawk, so it's kind of fun.
Oh, I love it. Well, you were talking about, your characters, about the guy who's like, the bad kind of dictator guy, and he goes through a transformation, changing. I was thinking about how we were talking about with so much of this urban fantasy, people who they're vampires or they're lycanthropes or whatever. Urban fantasy seems to deal with a lot of like transformative characters undergoing transformation, whether it's an internal transformation, changing as they go through their story, or an actual physical transformation because of, some sort of fantasy element. But it sounds kind of like, it just hit me that seems like kind of a theme that I hadn't thought about before for those of us who enjoy the urban fantasy.
I think that is a great point. And I think the reason people love urban fantasy is because it feels like someone who could be living right next door.
Yeah.
And that is the great thing about it.
Yeah. Even if they're a teddy bear or an onion.
Exactly.
Or a bunny.
Or a stalk of broccoli. Yeah, or a bunny. Yeah. One of these days I'm going to put a rabbit in my urban
You've
fantasy.
got to do.
Have to find the right story.
Well, we call our rabbit, her name's Dee, we call her the queen of all the warrior buns.
Nice.
She's actually very sweet and lovable now, but she's still the queen of all the warrior buns because she can hold her own.
It's been great talking to you again, Michael. We're going to have to wrap things up, but before we go, can you go ahead and tell us where people can find you and all your stuff online?
Yes. Well, this has been a blast. Thank you for having me. If anyone is interested in my writing stuff, you can find me at authorlevelup.com. That's where my YouTube channel lives, all of my podcasts, all of my books for writers. If any of that stuff resonated with you, you can find it there. And then if you're interested in my fiction, you can find that at michaellaronn.com. That's Michael, Michael, La Ronn, LARONN. It's got links to all my novels that I mentioned today.
Hi, this is Chris Fox, author of Write to Market in 5,000 Words Per Hour, and you were listening to Genretainment.
Thanks again for taking the time to chat with us, Michael.
And we'll have links on the show notes to help all of you find his books, podcasts, and YouTube channel.
So that's it for today's Genretainment. Watch out for our next episode, and
until next
time. Bad monkey.